Yo guys, what is going on? Jake Felzine here, back with another video, and today we are talking about my 3 all-time favorite, well, current favorites. It's always subject to change, but as of right now, after 3 years of shooting Micro Four Thirds, we're going to talk about my 3 favorite lenses. Let's get right on into it. Lens selection is critical. Many bodies will come and go, but your lenses need to last you. That's why making the right decision on the right lenses is critically important. Let's dive right on into it. And guys, let's just cut right to it. I have been a Micro Four Thirds shooter, like I said in the intro, for about 3 years. Started with the Panasonic G7, upgraded to the Panasonic G9, then bought the GH5S, and if you can believe it, that didn't have enough video features for my liking, so I decided to buy the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema 4K as well. Now, ironically, this episode is being shot on the Sony a7 III, my newest camera, but I do have to say it took me 3 years before I finally decided to jump into the full frame realm, and that's because I was just so satisfied with Micro Four Thirds and still am today. I shoot a ton on Micro Four Thirds and have just kind of started dabbling in the full frame space, but that is not important because today we are going to be talking about my top 3 favorite lenses, and as we go through them, I'm going to give a little bit of context as to why they are my favorite, because some of them don't make sense maybe to some of you, maybe they do, but we're just going to kind of go right on into it, and let's get started. Coming up in the 3rd place spot, guys, is the 45-150 Panasonic. This lens might surprise some of you, but I gotta say, it is a lens that I absolutely love. I will say that I think you could kind of, in the 3rd place slot for my personal preference, substitute any telephoto lens. The main reason is that I just love how small and compact this lens is, but for how much reach you get. The reason I love telephoto lenses with Micro Four Thirds cameras is you're getting that 2x crop factor. So a 150mm lens that is this small is actually about a 300mm full frame equivalent, meaning you're getting 2 times the zoom. And if you're new around the block, Micro Four Thirds cameras typically can shoot 4K at up to 60 frames per second. So as you can imagine, filming wildlife or anything that involves a telephoto lens can be absolutely fantastic on Micro Four Thirds. This lens in particular I like because it goes from about that 90 range to that 300 range. It's incredibly small, it's incredibly compact, it has great optical image stabilization, and although it's not the fastest lens, meaning it doesn't let in as much light as some of these other choices we're going to talk about, I still love how much reach you get with it, and that's why I'm putting it at my number 3 spot. Like I said, guys, do not underestimate zoom lenses. Take advantage of them. If you shoot Micro Four Thirds, use them to your advantage, because your full frame counterparts, they're not often whipping out the 70-200s, and again, that doesn't even have the reach of this lens. This can go 100mm further, and it's just a fraction of the size. So it's going to be a great way for you to stand out from a lot of full frame shooters who don't like to dig into their bags and carry those lunker 70-200 lenses that are just a pain in the butt to work with. Coming up in the 2nd place slot is the Panasonic 25mm f1.7. This lens was the first prime that I bought after using the kit lens in the G7, and I was just blown away by what f1.7 could look like. f1.7 is going to let in a lot more light and help you get those creamier backgrounds. Again, like you're seeing on this full frame camera, the light back here is very much bokeh'd and blurred out, whereas I'm nice and sharp. With this lens, although it's not quite as good as a full frame 2.8 equivalent, it's getting pretty darn close. And I do have to say, guys, and be honest with you, even though this lens doesn't compare to a full frame 2.8 lens like I'm using right now, for that delicious bokeh, blurry background, you know, cinematic look, I think the math kind of varies, and again, I don't think it's exactly a 2 times equivalent. If we ballpark it to about 2 times, that f1.7 becomes about an f3.4, which is kind of close to 2.8, and it looks relatively close to 2.8, but it's not quite as good. But that being said, because it is sort of an almost telephoto lens, you get a little bit more reach. This lens can look, dare I say, very cinematic. And to boot, it's the cheapest lens that we're going to talk about tonight. It's incredibly lightweight, and there's really no reason to not throw it into your bag if you're just heading out to shoot. Could not recommend this lens enough. If you're looking for that first sort of after the kit lens, this is one I would recommend. I gotta change that time code, that's killing me. So guys, before we announce my #1 favorite lens for Micro Four Thirds, let's do a couple of honorable mentions. Now, although it's not a Micro Four Thirds lens, the first honorable mention that I would like to give is to the Sigma 18-35 EF cropped lens. Pair that with the Viltrox Speed Booster for Micro Four Thirds, and you are getting an absolutely deadly combo for Micro Four Thirds. Now again, I didn't put this in my top 3 just because it's not a native lens. However, if you guys are watching people like, you know, all of the YouTubers that you love, Peter McKinnon, Daniel Schiffer, Peter Lindgren, you know, whoever the case may be, and they're shooting on something like an A7 III or maybe a Canon camera that's full frame, strap this lens onto your GH5, GH5S, and it's gonna look very close to full frame. After doing the math, in particular on my favorite Micro Four Thirds camera, the GH5S, it's about a 1.2 crop, which is only 0.2 off of full frame, and when you get that fast aperture, you can't tell a difference. It is more shallow than this lens that we're using right now on a full frame camera. If you're looking for a narrative type lens or a documentary lens and you want that super creamy background, very artsy look, excellent colors, this lens paired with something like the GH5S is absolutely dynamite. But again, it's not a native lens, so you're not going to get autofocus. I mean, you do, but it's not even good enough to consider it autofocus. You lose autofocus, and it's just a very heavy lens. When pairing all of these lenses on the home defense score, the Sigma 18-35 actually did better in testing than my 12 gauge shotgun. All jokes aside, guys, this lens is a brick. It's very heavy, and that's why it didn't make my top 3 on top of not being a native Micro Four Thirds lens. But I use it on Micro Four Thirds cameras, and I do love it, I have to say. Coming up for my second honorable mention is the Leica 8-18. This lens almost made it in the top 3 for me. I love this lens. It just isn't quite there in my top 3 today. Maybe next time if we make this video again, it will be in my top 3. But if you are a landscape photographer or a vlogger, or you just are someone who really likes that very wide look, this is your lens. Like, this should be in your top 3. You should get this lens. I wouldn't recommend any of the others because it's a zoom. You get a little bit more flexibility, and it's just crazy wide, which has all kinds of advantages. And to be honest with you, even though it's only a 2.8 lens for Micro Four Thirds, that 8mm, 16mm full frame equivalent can be very fun for solo B-roll shooting. The bokeh isn't quite as ridiculous, but you can get very close to your subjects, and that wide look just has this kind of larger than life feel to it, and I do love this lens for that. But I gotta say, recently my taste has really tapered off at about a 28 to 30mm equivalent. That's kind of the widest I'm preferring these days. Just kind of personal preference. That's what I've been shooting, that's what I've been liking. So this lens did not make the top 3. So Jake, what is it? What is the #1 lens, guys? Well, my favorite lens for Micro Four Thirds happens to be this little jobby right here. This is the Leica 15mm f1.7 lens, and it is by far my favorite lens for Micro Four Thirds cameras. It has a lot going for it. It's got a nice metal build. It's very durable. Even though it's technically not weather sealed, I have used this lens to take a full-on splash from my dad when he drove through a stream in the Razor. It still works great. It still runs fine. Definitely wouldn't recommend doing that, but it is built very well. It's not plasticky like the 25mm. It is a bit pricier, but this is by far my favorite lens potentially ever. On top of being an f1.7, so you're getting a very good depth of field. Again, not full frame worthy, but pretty darn close, and in most situations this lens is going to crush it for you if you're wanting that, again, cinematic look. 15mm on Micro Four Thirds is roughly 30mm full frame. Again, 30mm is just my sweet spot right now. I love how it's a little bit more punched in, but it's definitely still a very wide angle, but it's not telephoto and it's not ultra wide where it just distorts everything. 30mm is one of my favorite focal lengths. In fact, right now we're shooting on 28, so 28, 30, I'm really liking this focal length, guys. And to boot, this lens is literally tiny. Like, Like, look at this thing. Like, seriously, this is like almost, it's like 2 of the Viltrox adapters put together, and then you've got this whole freaking brick. So when it comes to run and gun, travel type stuff, I love this lens because it just gives you such a good look. The colors look fantastic. It's small, it's lightweight, it's great for that reason. For an example, guys, I brought this lens with the Panasonic G9, didn't have the GH5S at the time, on my wife and I's honeymoon when we went to Banff. And it was the only lens I had with the, the only camera at the time that I had. And I absolutely loved that setup. I thought all of the footage turned out great. And honestly, I couldn't love this lens more. It is my favorite lens for sure. If you're looking for that delish top shelf prime, this is the one I would recommend. So guys, that's my favorite lens, but that does leave one major question. And I think you guys might be wondering, Jake, where is the Panasonic 12-35? Everyone raves about this lens and it didn't even make your honorable mention list. What's going on? And guys, here's the reason for it. f2.8 for micro four thirds is just not good enough. It's not enough depth of field of view. I don't love shooting with it. And in that 12-75 range, you really start to taper into this middle ground where it gets even harder to get closer to subjects, or I don't know, it's just kind of, I don't totally know how to describe it, but anywhere in that 12 or 24 range, you kind of hit this no man's zone where if you don't have a really shallow depth of field of view, you're going to get shots that just don't look as, blurry in the background. Now again, you might not care about this. This might not be something that's important to you, but I just gotta say, after buying the A7 III with the Tamron 28-75 full frame, f2.8 the whole way through, I now realize what people are talking about when they say full frame, and it was the nail in the coffin. The 12-35 is just not my favorite lens. I've never loved what I've gotten with it, and after seeing what full frame in that range can do, I realized, yeah, I was right this whole time. So that's why my 2 favorites are those f1.7 primes. I just think they look better. And then the telephoto, because it's just kind of getting the most out of a smaller sensor camera, which you don't have to worry about as much with something like a full frame sensor. So, but again, maybe that's not important to you. Maybe you don't care about that. Maybe you just need a good lens with good stabilization that can get all the different angles in that range. Then of course I would recommend that lens. But for me, just in a lot of real world scenarios, I just have never been overly impressed with it, and that's why it didn't make my list today. But guys, that just about wraps it up. Hope you liked this video. If you did, leave it a like, comment down below what kind of system are you using, what lenses do you like. Let's just chat. That's what the comment section is for. If you are new around here, consider subscribing. We do a lot of camera talk as well as trying to get ourselves into creative boxes and make cool stuff. That's all. Peace out. You guys have a good one. And don't forget, as always, that creativity comes from constraint. See you guys.